Judges that play competitively will sometimes try and bring IPG fixes from the competitive rules enforcement from their RPTQs. Nope, RPTQs don't exist anymore.
RPTQs.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
I think I was just going into IPG territory there for a second.
Yeah.
Let me.
Yeah. You fell
cards are
victim
known
to
to
one of
both
the
parties.
classic blunders.
I did the thing that we're not supposed to. You
did
said
the
don't
thing that
do
we're
this
not-
thing, and then I went and did it. Ah.
Hello and welcome to JudgeCast. This is episode 23 of our series of YouTube videos focusing on how to become a level 1 judge. My name is Bryan and I am joined this evening, afternoon, morning drive to work by the one and only Charles Feather.
Hello.
And the one and only Marco Sanchez.
Hello, everybody. So let's start off, as always, by giving a shout out to our sponsor. This episode and series is sponsored by Judge Foundry. Judge Foundry is a membership-based nonprofit organization serving the U.S. and Canada in providing certifications for tabletop gaming officials. They manage everything to do with obtaining and maintaining your certification and provide educational resources like this one to ensure that every Judge Foundry certified judge has the knowledge and skills to be successful. When it comes to running Magic events at your LGS or at a larger international convention, Judge Foundry is a great resource for you to certify your skills. For more information on Judge Foundry, visit judgefoundry.org and click on the orange Become a Judge button to find out how you can earn your level. You can also join the Judge Foundry Discord to chat and interact with the Judge Foundry judging community in the US and Canada. The links for both are in the description below.
In this episode, we're going to spend some time with the Judging at Regular Rules Enforcement Level document. As always, not every corner is explored in depth, but if you wish to go deeper or explore topics faster than these videos come out, you can delve into our extensive library at judgecast.com or search for us in your podcast app of choice. Our podcasts are typically at least an hour, so you get both more detailed discussion, humor, insight, and of course, our resonant peroration. This episode will cover basic jar philosophy, common issues, stuff that happens a lot, general unwanted behaviors, stuff that happens less often but we want to guide the players away from, and serious problems, stuff that hopefully happens infrequently or even not at all, but you will have to deal with these things right away.
But before we even talk about the specific information in the jar, we want to talk about the jar's place in the document hierarchy. So we've got the comprehensive rules that covers everything mechanically about a game of Magic: The Gathering. It's there to explain the gameplay, the mechanics, what players can do during their turn. The CR is used both playing at the kitchen table and at the Pro Tour. The Magic Tournament rules, the MTR, defines event structures and the common rules to events not covered in the comprehensive rules. This is where we start to diverge from the kitchen table and start to deal with how players interact with each other, judges, and tournament staff. However, the Magic Tournament rules just tell us how things are supposed to be structured, and they don't address what happens when someone breaks that structure. The Infraction Procedure Guide, or IPG, helps judges navigate how to issue penalties at competitive rules enforcement level. Okay, this is not going to be an episode where we talk about the IPG in this series, since it's not needed for the L1 test. And to be honest, you should almost actively ignore it at this point in your studies, because judges that play competitively will sometimes try to bring IPG fixes from the competitive rules enforcement level into regular rel. And it's important to remember that the rules enforcement levels are different. That brings us to the Judging at Regular Rules Enforcement Level document, which is affectionately referred to as the JAR. Unlike my long-winded spiel here, the JAR is a deliberately short document. It's meant to be something that judges know and that the store employees who are roped into running F&M can reference quickly to figure out what to do.
Yep, it's only 2 pages. It's designed for you to be able to quickly glance at it and find what you need quickly. So, let's open this jar. The first paragraph of the jar outlines its purpose. It starts by stating why most players play: for fun, and that they see tournaments as social events. Regular rules enforcement level is used to promote an educational and comfortable environment for players. Normally, we try to make events both fun and fair, And at regular, we bias slightly more towards fun. But ultimately, the jar defines the role of the judge as impartial and to be the final arbiter in cases where a dispute or a question happens.
For Magic players that attend Friday Night Magic or any other regular event at a local game store, they will be interacting with organized play for perhaps the first time. The jar guides us in offering a welcoming environment, but cautions that players could, through their actions, make others uncomfortable. Let's talk about a possible scenario. Anna is playing Nolan. Anna is turning something Nolan is saying into double entendres. This behavior may not be bothering Nolan, but it's easily heard by other players, and this kind of talk might be making others uncomfortable. The jar guides judges in remedying this situation, which starts with talking with Anna, but could end up being handled as a serious problem. Often, all a judge needs to do is step in to a situation like this and have a word with the person making others uncomfortable. While we want players to be comfortable in their local store, some players may get a bit too comfortable and need reminders that they are in a public space and not their own home. We'll return to Anna and Nolan a little later on.
And much like social dynamics, the gameplay of Magic, as we're all aware at this point, is also complicated. Players are going to make mistakes at this level of play, and they're going to do so regularly. So one of the best instructions judges can make at regular or any level of play is to tell players to call a judge if and when they need assistance. We want players comfortable with asking us for help, whether it's to fix a problem or to explain an interaction, and at regular, our solution should lean more towards education and keeping the players playing, rather than the impact of the game. We do not want to be excessively heavy-handed. If you remember, we said we want to keep games fair and fun, but at F&M we bias a little bit more towards fun. And don't get us wrong, keeping things fair is important too, but your focus should be first on helping them understand what went wrong and how to prevent it from happening from the future and getting them playing again.
The jar empowers judges to step in if we see something illegal happen in a match, but it also allows us a little bit of discretion to help shape the tone you want for your particular store. For example, we may have a bit more flexibility with dealing with missed triggers, for example, depending on if we want a more casual or a more competitive environment. You can even change the tone based on event type, but you do want to be consistent. You might be more helpful dealing with missing a trigger at a pre-release than you would be at a store championship, for example, whereas pre-release there's a lot of new information and also a lot newer players typically than you would find at the more competitive leaning store championship.
As the jar is targeted at both new judges and store employees, it gives some direction on what to do if you are unsure of a ruling. You should double check your rulings. Look things up in the comprehensive rules, or use the myriad of online resources to get quick answers to live questions. Just don't use ChatGPT for crying out loud. Players tend to be more forgiving of rules that take more time versus rulings that are wrong. Remember to give players extra time for the time the questions or issue took to resolve. Don't use fixes in the IPG at regular. We'll probably emphasize this again. This is really important. Please don't do it. Use the prescribed remedies for problems found in the jar and your common sense. And it allows for some amount of creativity with fixes. The prescribed fix doesn't always work out in everyone's best interest, so it allows you a small amount of flexibility here. There are many times when players at a game store or even a larger event may have learned how to do something incorrectly, like assigning lethal damage with trample and death touch. Taking extra moments to explain how something works may have benefits you can't see. A player will take that new information and apply it in other environments.
Now, the last point before we move on to the next section that we want to emphasize is that some events should not be run at regular. So events that require a deck list, have larger prizes, or are of a more competitive nature are probably going to be better at competitive rules enforcement level, where we do focus more on fair instead of fun. This is where penalties and warnings and shuffling cards back into your deck start coming into play. What are larger prizes in this case? What is more competitive? This is typically going to be left up to the tournament organizer to decide. But if first place prize is collector boosters box, then maybe you want to consider running this event at competitive REL. And to be honest, there's a lot of events that have prize pools that really would be better set at competitive rel, and the TO chooses to run it at regular. So if you're running like a 1K at regular rel, think about that.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next section, which is discussing common issues. The jar provides us with 5 categories of common issues. Common issues happen frequently, or are common, and we want to educate, fix, and get players turning cards sideways again. In the case when a player repeatedly commits the same common issue multiple times in the same event or even the same match, you should counsel them to play more carefully and remind them that further instances of that issue may result in a game loss. Now, game losses should not be handed out lightly. In fact, game losses should typically exclusively be part of competitive rel fixes. However, the jar does give you the ability to issue a game loss in a place where you need a little extra oomph to actually help the lesson really take root with that player. In the situation where a player has made the same mistake over and over and over again, you need to advise them of the importance of being more aware of what is happening in their games and that they're continuing to be careless, in which case that game loss should definitely help the lesson stick, we hope.
A player missing a trigger is also a frequent occurrence. Triggers are missed when players pass the point where they would have a visible effect in the game, or they didn't acknowledge it when it required some choices to be made. If the trigger has a may ability, assume that the player chose not to perform it. To fix it, put a missed trigger on the stack if it won't be disruptive and not too much has happened in the game. Too much here is deliberately subjective and vague. Typically, we look at the quantity of significant decisions made, maybe where we are in the turn. Maybe it was a beginning of combat trigger and we just declared attackers. Could be that it was an enter the battlefield trigger that was missed 2 or even 3 turns ago. Triggers are also a little special in that when a player misses theirs, the opponent does not have to point them out. That said, try to foster a community where players feel comfortable doing this, at least the first time it's missed in a match. How do we do that? Well, if you're a player judging the event, point it out when your opponent misses theirs. Be the example that you want others to be.
The next common issue is just simply seeing a card that you aren't supposed to, right? Sometimes a card flips out while shuffling, or it gets knocked off the top of the library, or you start to draw a card and you knock something over. These issues are pretty common and typically the result of a player failing their dexterity check. So how do we fix this? It's typically simple enough to just shuffle that card that they weren't supposed to have seen into the unknown portion of the library. And what we mean by the unknown portion of the library is the part of the library where we don't know the order of any of the cards. So that excludes any cards that maybe we scribed to the bottom, or when we mulliganed, we placed on the bottom. Something along those lines. We want to preserve those cards. So if 3 cards have been scribed to the bottom, we're going to pick up everything but those 3, shuffle that card away, bada boom, bada bing, done.
The next most common issue would be things like drawing extra cards or having too many cards and not knowing how they got there. So if cards were known to both parties...
Honestly, not knowing how they got there. Is just,
yes,
I don't
not
know how
the,
these got... Right.
Yes, if the player has shifty eyes and is starting to look around and like twirling their mustache a little bit, then you might have a different problem, but that comes up later. But in this instance, if cards were known to both parties because, let's say, for example, I explored and revealed the top card of my library, or we just both happen to know what that card was, then we can just return the card that was known to where it needs to be. Now, if the cards were hidden, then what we're going to do is figure out how many extra cards we have, and then we're going to randomly select that number of cards that ended up in that place, probably the hand, and then put them on top of the library, since they very likely came from there. Now, when you place these cards on top of the library, This is really important, so pay attention, ears open. Do not shuffle. You had access to these cards at some point, just not yet. Especially because we're randomly choosing from the hand, there's a strong possibility that cards that they were legally allowed to have at that time might end up on top of their deck. So do not shuffle at this point. In the case of drawing extra cards, when you're drawing your opening hand, you'll shuffle the extra card back into the deck and allow the player to continue to make mulligan decisions based off of the correct number of cards that should be in their hand, typically 7.
Listeners, you ever get the sense that Marcos knows Snidely Whiplash personally? Ask your parents. So the fourth item in common errors is, well, almost everything else. Aside from mistriggers, most in-game problems are going to fall into this category. Think in terms of triage here. First, identify what went wrong. If it's something like a state-based action needs to be enforced, just go ahead and do that. If the error was one where a player failed to draw cards, have them draw the cards. If they started their turn, they got all the way through their turn and they never drew their card at the beginning, let's do that.
Or discard. Do that now too.
Right.
Yep.
If the error can be fixed with an easy backup, back the game up to the point of the error. We're going to talk about this briefly here, okay? Backups can include returning random cards from the hand to the top of the library to undo card draws, untapping a permanent or permanents, and undoing combat. Don't get all fancy and do 8 different steps to back up, okay? If a number of decisions have been made or too much hidden information has been revealed, don't do the backup. Be smart and patient about performing backups. If it takes more than a few steps, don't even consider it.
The thing here where we say you back up all the actions, or if too much information has been given or it's too complex, it's okay to leave the game alone. This is because all of these errors right here can be seen by both opponents or both players. There's an opportunity. Both players are involved in getting the game to where we are right now. Also, rewinding and backing up, you run the risk of making things worse. We assume a perfect world where I can back up 6 actions and everything be fine. There is the likelihood, there is the possibility that you're going to mess something up. And you could actually have the game go forward in a worse state than if you had just left it alone. So, the last item is not an in-game error per se, but it's if a player has illegal, insufficient, or another player's cards in their deck. Okay? This can happen a few ways. Card is illegal in the format. Again, this is F&M. Players are going to come in with all different levels of experience. So someone could come in with their Garruk versus Liliana dual deck and want to play in standard. Or they could have a Lightning Bolt in their standard deck. Lightning Bolt's not legal. A player is playing a 39 card deck in limited or a 59 card deck in constructed. Or there's a lot of cards that when you play it and it enters the battlefield, you exile an opponent's card and you typically put that under. You could accidentally pick up an opponent's card from the previous match and have it in your deck in this match, especially if the sleeves are the same color. To fix this, we're going to remove all the cards that shouldn't be there and put back all the cards that should be. And if the deck size ends up being too small for the format, we're going to add basic lands until we get it just right. Cards that are added to any deck should go straight into the library, which should also be shuffled, noting, again, the position of all known cards. We want to maintain those. If the error was discovered while drawing cards, have the player stop, fix the problem, and then finish the draw effect. Okay? One way, or 2 ways rather, to help avoid these type of problems is to advise players to count their library before they play in the match, and then maybe even after the match is over, just so they can be sure that they don't have anybody else's cards in there. Do a sleeve check kind of thing. Make sure that you don't have a black sleeve in with your matte black sleeves kind of thing.
All right, moving on from our common issues, now we're going to discuss general unwanted behaviors. This class of actions by players is the next tier of our discussion, and these are specifically inadequate shuffling, or that is to say, not enough shuffling to properly randomize a deck, It is taking too long in making play or sideboarding decisions, asking for or providing strategic or play advice during a match or a draft. So this could be something like Charles asking Beepril as he's walking by to go grab a soda from the counter, asking Beepril, "Hey Beepril, should I block this guy?" Or even just something as simple as Beepril walking by and being like, "Whoa, sick hand," and pointing out a card in his opponent's hand. Tardiness, note being 10 minutes late, is a match loss for the player who is tardy, and they are to be dropped from the event just before the pairings for the next round go out. Now, this is important because tardiness can be something as simple as they went to go get a sandwich from the shop down the street and they're not back yet. They didn't realize that they're too late for the match. They can't play in the match, but you don't want to drop them right away either because they might still want to play the next round even though they lost this match. Also, influencing match outcomes through either coercion, incentives, or anything other than playing a game of Magic, or gambling on any part of a tournament.
I bet you a pack. No, don't do that.
Don't do it.
Yep, that's an
pull
unwanted
up.
behavior. So I want to touch a little bit on that influencing match outcomes through coercion and incentives or other than playing a game of Magic. Okay, yeah, you can simply have, hey, winner, let's roll to see who gets the pack. Okay, that is an unwanted behavior. Okay, it is not a game loss or a match loss or anything like that at regular rel, unless the player knows that they're not allowed to do it. If they know they're not supposed to roll a dice, or they know they're not supposed to play rock, paper, scissors for it, then that's where we get into the next thing that we're going to be talking about in just a little bit, which is the serious problems. Because it's the knowing that, doing something wrong is unwanted. Knowing that you're doing something wrong for an advantage is where we start getting into serious problems.
Yeah, and we are, remember, trying to educate, and that's why these are generally unwanted behaviors. There are things that can happen where players might not know any better, and it's up to you to help educate that player and inform them of how things work at a tournament. Ignorance versus the understanding of what they're doing is the delineating factor there. So once again, and we're going to reiterate this a couple of times probably, but if you end up having problems with players who are repeatedly behaving this way with these generally unwanted behaviors, then you do have the ability to issue a game loss if you feel it is necessary to drive the point home. Again, generally unwanted behaviors, typically you're not doing these intentionally, but these are still things that we do not want happening at tournaments, so we really need to drive that message home. Again, education is the first point of attack. You want to make sure we educate players on the importance of correcting these behaviors. But if we're still not getting through and it's still not something that they're taking the action to ensure it doesn't happen again, you have the ability to pull out the game loss and hopefully it sinks in then. Now, if a player intentionally performs these actions, for instance, taking too long in making their sideboarding decisions so that they can eat up time at the end of a round so that they can force a draw or get a win because they're only in game 2, then the behavior may be escalated to a serious problem.
If players are engaging in any of the following behaviors that I'm going to list in a moment, it must be addressed. We should make efforts to educate players from signage listing TO rules, tournament organizer rules, to opening announcements. If players do one of the following actions, they should be removed from the event and perhaps the venue. Before we go removing anybody from the venue, we want to talk to the TO and have the TO involved in that actual process. Your tournament organizer, store manager, whoever. Serious problems include aggressive, violent, harassing, and abusive can be physical or verbal, behaviors. Insults based on race, skin color, nationality, age, gender, disability, sexual orientation, and or intentionally misgendering are all unacceptable. Basically, if you're going to be a butt, you're going to get bounced. Knowingly breaking or letting an opponent break game rules. Note, this is not missing triggers, okay? Or if you're lying to gain an advantage. This doesn't include bluffing either. What is bluffing? Well, that's leaving open 2 blue mana in a format that has counterspell and saying, I might have a counterspell. When you have 2 lands in hand, that's a bluff, okay? Theft. Well, we all pretty much know what theft is, but theft we want to define a little bit more closely here. It's either the theft of a player's materials, somebody else's, not yours. You can't steal your own stuff. Or a table tent of a number that you think is funny. And we all know which ones those are. Ha ha, 69, 420. Yeah. Don't steal them.
6-7.
So
and 6-7.
I'm gonna go off script here for a second.
Yeah.
Last event that I was at, table 6-7 got stolen before table 6-9. I kind of feel like wow.
I
kind of feel like that's a watershed moment.
It is. When you remove a player from an event, you are disqualifying them. There's a process for disqualification that allows players to tell their side of the story. Please consult whatever the current version of the jar is, because it does get periodically updated. To report a disqualification properly, make sure to collect information from the player at the same time, so long as the player is still present in the venue, and help to educate them about the reason for the disqualification. Just because you're disqualifying somebody doesn't mean that they can't learn from the disqualification at the same time that you're going through this process. But also, if they're really mad, just handle things professionally and move them along.
And lastly, the jar has a couple of helpful resources at the end in the current printing. So they are links to the Magic Tournament rules. There's an IRC chat for rules questions. There's also a reference to a Discord called The Gathering Point that has a 24/7 live call assistance channel. So feel free to check out any of those docs, but especially the MTR, which we talked about in last episode. There's really no section of the MTR that you're not going to get value out of reading.
And with that, that covers the jar. We told you it wasn't too long. So, once again, we'd like to thank Judge Foundry for their support in sponsoring this series for helping you earn your Level 1 certification. Make sure to visit judgefoundry.org and click on the orange Become a Judge button to learn how you can join the magic judging community in the US and Canada and earn your certification with Judge Foundry.
Join us next time as we continue our series for earning your Level 1 certification and talk about, well, how to take a judge call. And if you want to reach out to us, we have our own Discord server for judges new and old, fans, and anyone who supports the judging community. The invite link to our Discord is in the description below, as well as our JudgeCast and individual social media links. If you're a fan of our content, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel and ring that bell to be notified of when new videos in this series are posted or when a new episode of our full podcast is released. Make sure to check out our channel's playlists and our complete L1 series, as well as a Learn to Judge playlist with episodes from JudgeCast's history focused on helping you become a better judge. And as always, you can find everything relating to JudgeCast at judgecast.com. With that, I'm Charles Featherer, and I keep it fair.
I'm Marcos Sanchez, and I keep it fun.
I'm Bryan Perlman, and my issues are pretty common. My behaviors are generally unwanted, and my problems are all serious.